Welcome to the Jenna Ellis Show, sponsored by Legacy Precious Metals. There has never been a better time to invest in precious metals. Visit legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com. Good evening and welcome to Jenna Ellis Tonight. So breaking in the wee hours this morning, a ship has apparently crashed into one of the poles of the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore, causing the entire bridge to collapse in just this absolutely horrific video that several cameras have caught footage of this. And the latest reports are suggesting that this cargo ship lost power and control over steering. There were some of those issues, and so it slammed into one of those posts. And the first responders are calling this a mass casualty situation. And as of the latest that we have from the city of Baltimore and the Maryland Police Department, they are still looking for individuals who may be trapped in vehicles submerged under the water. So our thoughts and prayers go out to everyone that has been affected by this. I know this kind of took the entire city of Baltimore and the greater DC area just by surprise and horror this morning. And so, of course, the Biden administration and Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg was asked about this. And can I just ask a question? What is he even doing? Is he remotely competent to even address any of these situations? Like when you have a tragedy like this and something that is this horrific, this is what Pete Buttigieg actually thought was relevant to talk about. He's going on and on about how bridges and construction, our transportation, our infrastructure is racist. That's his priority. Watch this.
If an underpass was constructed such that a bus carrying mostly Black and Puerto Rican kids to a beach, or that would have been in New York, was designed too low for it to pass by, that obviously reflects racism that went into those design choices. I don't think we have anything to lose by confronting that simple reality, and I think we have everything to gain by acknowledging it and then dealing with it, which is why the Reconnecting Communities, that $1 billion, is something we want to get to work right away.
Let's bring in Auron Macintyre, who is a writer for The Blaze. And Auron, this just honestly really pisses me off that he is focused on racism and infrastructure and has that kind of smug look on his face as if like that's his priority, instead of actually addressing maybe a different issue or the problems here, or just taking a moment to actually deal with the tragedy that occurred. But this speaks a lot to the Biden administration's priorities and just their lack of concern for Americans' well-being overall. So what's your response?
Yeah, I believe this was a clip from earlier when he was making this a priority, when he was on a kind of a press push for this. Pete Buttigieg has repeatedly expressed his concern over this issue, and that the racism of our infrastructure is somehow the most important thing that we can address. Now, obviously, when we look at situations like this, we realize how dire that focus becomes. Now, when we look at the accident that occurred in Baltimore, I've had a lot of people who are civic engineers tell me that most bridges could not probably survive an impact of this magnitude. So I don't know if this particular bridge had any specific maintenance issues. Maybe this is just something that bridges are not built to withstand, and this is just a horrible accident. But it does speak to the priorities of the Biden administration and the larger problem we have with competency. The real question is, when we go to rebuild a bridge like this, will we be able to do so? At what speed and at what cost? The infrastructure of the United States is crumbling, and the most important thing for the people in charge of that infrastructure is whether or not someone can get to whatever neighborhood, and whether that indicates racism.
Right. And I think you're absolutely correct that, this shows the priorities, because Pete Buttigieg does, talk about racism a lot. And I don't even know at this point if he's even made any comment today. He hasn't taken the moment to stop and actually reflect. I mean, what is he doing, going and just, being with his family, which that's a whole other conversation about, the priorities of basically being, the first open homosexual in a marriage, in this, which it's not even a marriage, but in the Biden cabinet, and that kind of diversity quotient that obviously the Biden administration wants, instead of, as you mentioned, basic competency. And so, let's contrast though the city of Baltimore with in the state of Maryland, which is clearly under a lot of Democrat control, versus Florida. And we saw some of the bridges that were taken out by some of the hurricanes last year, and those bridges were able to be rebuilt within days. I mean, it was truly amazing, the resources that Governor DeSantis marshaled to address these kinds of problems. And that was, not credit to the Biden administration. That was credit to his leadership. So I think we need more priorities like Governor DeSantis. But what good then is having a transportation secretary looking at infrastructure?
Yeah, that literally happened in my neighborhood. I was in that hurricane and wiped out bridges to many of my friends' neighbors in the Sanibel and Captiva Islands. And so the ability to go ahead and get those causeways replaced, get those bridges put up immediately was critical. There were people trapped out there, many elderly people who were unable to get the medical care that they needed. And so being able to quickly go ahead and reestablish that infrastructure is absolutely essential. And that's why it's so critical that we have executives that are staffing their branches based on the ability to get things done. This is not some mild problem. This is not time for you to work out your social issues or your progressive agenda in the way that we take care of our nation. This is people's lives. This is our economy. This is people's safety. And we need to make sure that the people who are able to do this are the ones in charge, not somebody who happens to check the number of diversity boxes that make you happy. And this only comes to the forefront when we look at the horrific collapse of something like this bridge.
Yeah, it's really well said. And, and this isn't just in government administration, administrative offices like the transportation secretary. I mean, we're even seeing, some of the diversity, equity, inclusion priorities of, like, for example, the Boeing company, and a lot of the focus that has been on the safety of the airline industry. And so I think this gets into a bigger topic of DEI. And we're down to the last 30 seconds here, Auron, but what should the priority be on for government offices in particular, rather than diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Well, the shift absolutely has to come to competency at any cost. We need to get rid of these requirements. We need to stop talking about how workplaces or government institutions need to reflect anything other than the ability of the people there to get the job done. We need to reject this bias for identity and move to competence.
Yeah, I mean, competence, basic competence should be the metric. I mean, when I get on an airplane, I don't really care, what the pilot looks like, how old they are, their gender, anything like that. I care that they can fly the plane, land it safely, and get me to my destination. It's true for surgeons, it's true for attorneys. I mean, it's true for any profession. You want basic competency, but the left seems to be allergic to competency. So we'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis Tonight. Throughout history, there are clear moments that define our nation's path, and now you can own a piece of that history. I'm thrilled to announce the official Newt Gingrich contract with America coin from our friends at Legacy Precious Metals in partnership with Speaker Gingrich. This limited edition 1 ounce, 99.99% silver coin commemorates the historic victory in 1994 when the Republican Party, under Speaker Gingrich's guidance, took control of Congress. The Newt Gingrich contract with America coin also symbolizes the transformative political platform that led to the landmark achievements like the overhaul of the U.S. welfare system and the Balanced Budget Act. This is a limited edition coin that will sell out. So whether you're looking for the perfect gift or you want to own a piece of history, act fast before they run out. The Newt Gingrich contract with America coin is more than an investment. It's a tribute to honest government and America. You can order it online at newtgingrichsilvercoin.com. That's newtgingrichsilvercoin.com, and use promo code Jenna, that's JENNA, to get $10 off your purchase. Go to newtgingrichsilvercoin.com now. Well, a lot of news coming out of Trump world and the legal issues in New York yesterday, with Trump getting a significant win from the appeals court with his bond being reduced to only, yes, only 175 million, but this down from the 454 million that he was originally asked to post. Our good friend Charlie Kirk tweeted this: Bernie Madoff $10 million bond for orchestrating the largest Ponzi scheme in history, defrauding 40,000 investors of billions in savings. Sam Bankman-Fried a $250 million bond for defrauding thousands of crypto investors out of billions of dollars to finance donations to Democrats and anti-Trump Republicans so they'd look the other way. Tried to use the stolen funds to bribe Donald Trump not to run. Donald Trump, $454 million bond for paying all of his loans. The bank he quote unquote defrauded testified in his defense that it would love to do business with Trump again. No victims. He helped build the New York City skyline. This is the most Soviet-style injustice ever perpetuated in American history, and it's not even close. So some of our Great Salem News Channel reporters asked some of the people on the street in New York what they thought about this $175 million bond and the overall Trump issue. This is what they had to say.
How do you feel about President Donald Trump's bond getting reduced?
Well, the fact that this had to even happen in the first place is quite ridiculous, because he's actually the current president of the United States of America. So it's wild that we have to go through this kind of rigmarole. But I suppose that Abraham Lincoln had to do the exact same thing with Jefferson Davis, who was the president of the Confederate States, when they were trying to say that he was not the president, the exact same way. It's wild, but again, I'm happy that President Trump is able to defend himself properly like every single American citizen because of the United States Constitution.
How do you feel about Donald Trump's bond getting reduced?
Disappointed.
Why?
I kind of hope that today he will go to bankruptcy and it will be the end of him.
How do you feel about Donald Trump's bond getting reduced?
I don't think it's a good idea.
No, why not?
So the bond is what the court set for him to pay, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, this generally comes off the back of the fact that I'm not a fan of Trump and what he stands for. So anything that goes his way which doesn't help him, I'm in favor of.
How do you feel about Donald Trump's bond getting reduced?
Actually, I think it was the right thing to do. I mean, it was excessive considering that none of the parties involved said they were lost any money. They actually said they made money, so it seemed a little odd.
So a lot of varying views, even for New York City. That's quite fascinating. But this also coming as this headline from the New York Post says that Trump's hush money trial to start April 15th after a judge denies his bid to further delay the case as ex-president's fraud bond reduced to $175 million. So let's bring in our Legal Eagle panel, Ron Coleman, who is part of the Dillon Law Group and host of the Coleman Nation podcast, and Michael Donnelly, who is a constitutional law professor. So gentlemen, this is really interesting. And I think the man on the street stuff just shows that people have a view of the law dependent on whether they love or hate Trump. And Ron, that's not really our standard in law.
Well, some people have a view not only of the law, but of reality, right? I mean, I think, New York is a big place. And every single, listen, as a young lawyer, I discovered very early that you can find an opinion to support your position under New York law, regardless of what your position is, because there have been so many reported cases, and there are always so many reported cases, all the more so just plain people on the street. New York is an extremely diverse environment.
To put it mildly, I think. Mike Donnelly, so, the appeal was reduced, and I think that the bond, and I think that that was actually wise. I mean, the Eighth Amendment does prohibit excessive fines, but do you think that Trump can actually get a fair trial in this upcoming April 15th setting?
Well, that's a fair question, Jenna. And, what I'm reminded of is the two-tiered system of justice that seems to be occurring in our country. If you're a Trump supporter or if you're aligned with the right, you get treated one way. If you're a Democrat or aligned with the Biden administration, you get treated a different way. And, the current president is facing some impeachment hearings in the House, sure, but, 8 years after the fact, right? I mean, why is no one talking about the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act with regard to President Biden's visit to Ukraine, when he dangled $1 billion loan to get the prosecutor fired who was investigating Burisma. So, I'm glad that President Trump's bond was reduced so he can defend himself. Can he get a fair hearing in New York City? Well, you saw 2 people for him and 2 people against him. I mean, if it splits that way on the jury, if there is a jury, there wasn't one in the Engoron case, right? This is a bench trial for the fraud case, which is also concerning. So, and the other thing, I guess, is, Judge Engoron already said he found him guilty. So I think we've got some problems there. Fair trial? I'm not so sure.
Well, I think there's a lot of due process concerns and there are problems. But Ron, let's talk about the court of public opinion compared and contrasted with the actual court of law, because it seems like all of the political fallout and even what, Trump himself goes out and he's an expert in media. All of this seems to be more focused on the court of public opinion than it does the court of law. And I think that's actually a really dangerous precedent, regardless of your feelings on Trump, for the rule of law.
Well, when you say all of this, Jenna, what do you mean? Because, there's stuff that's being filed with courts. As a general principle, I would say that if I had a client who got a $300 million reduction in the amount of a bond, that would be a pretty big win. On the other hand, if I had a client who still had to pay a $145 million bond on an utterly non-meritorious case, especially, I might be a little bit frustrated. They are proceeding on both tracks. I believe that the lawyers whom I have not worked with on this, I'm not involved in this case at all, but I do have every reason to believe that they're taking this very seriously in terms of litigation conduct. But when you say all of this, I understand you to mean the circus. It's a circus. It is a political, look, the entire prosecution is a circus. It's an absolute affront to any concept of the rule of law. I'll answer the question that you asked a second ago. There's no chance whatsoever that Trump can get a fair trial, whether it's a jury trial or it's a bench trial. Donald Trump couldn't get a 5-cent shoe shine for 5 cents in New York. It's simply... It's not going to happen. Things have just spun completely out of control. The system has been utterly, utterly compromised. And far more than what happens to Donald Trump, which is important, what has happened to the system is really, really distressing.
Bad. Well, and we'll have to leave it there, but Legal Eagle Panel is sticking around for the next segment. We'll be right back. As you know, my friend Mike Lindell has a passion to help everyone get the best sleep of their life. He didn't stop by simply creating the best pillow. Mike created the Giza Dream bed sheets. They look and feel great, which means an even better night's sleep for me, which is crucial for my busy schedule. Mike found the world's best cotton. It is ultra soft and breathable, but extremely durable. Mike's Giza sheets come with a 60-day money-back guarantee and a 10-year warranty. The Giza Dream Sheets come in a variety of sizes and colors. Mike's latest incredible deal is the sale of the year. For a limited time, you will receive 50% off the Giza Dream Sheets. You will also receive a set for as low as $29.98. So go to mypillow.com, click on the radio podcast square, and use the promo code Jenna. There you will find not only this amazing offer, but also deep discounts on all MyPillow products, including the MyPillow 2.0 mattress topper, which I have and I love, the MyPillow kitchen towel sets, and now even flannel sheets and so much more. We definitely need flannel sheets for as crazy as all of this weather has been lately. So go to mypillow.com and make sure you use the promo code Jenna or call 1-800-564-8475. That's 1-800-564-8475 and use the promo code Jenna. Well, we'll be talking a lot more about the $1.2 trillion spending bill that President Joe Biden recently signed, unfortunately, but the Senate also voted to continue to fund the illegal immigrant flights that the Biden administration has admitted that over 350,000 illegals were flown into the country to unknown destinations. This also coming as this headline from Conservative Brief, the DOJ to create a new red flag center targeting gun rates. Buried in the massive omnibus spending bill House Speaker Mike Johnson allowed to come up for a vote late last week is funding for a new federal agency within the Justice Department that would effectively work to deny Americans their Second Amendment rights under the guise of being a quote-unquote threat. The DOJ made a statement from Attorney General Merrick Garland and announced the existence of a newly established National Extreme Risk Protection Order Resource Center. Quote, the launch of the National Extreme Risk Protection Order Resource Center will provide our partners across the country with valuable resources to keep firearms out of the hands of individuals who pose a threat to themselves or others, he said in a statement. The Attorney General, continued, the establishment of the center is the most recent illustration of the Justice Department's work to use every tool available by the historic bipartisan Safer Communities Act to protect communities from gun violence. So let's bring back our Legal Eagle panel, Ron Coleman and Mike Donnelly. So Mike, let's go to you first. This seems really dangerous, and like the DOJ is not actually helping anything with the American people. They're just continuing to work to undermine the U.S. Constitution.
Well, Jenna, the Second Amendment is one of the most important rights that we have as Americans, and any action by the government relating to taking guns away from Americans should be viewed with the highest level of skepticism. People need to be able to defend themselves, and they need to be able to use firearms for whatever purpose they deem appropriate. Now, I do want to just observe a couple of things. One, it appears that this is not a new agency. That would be something that would require a lot more from Congress. This is work that's being done by a partnership between the Department of Justice and Johns Hopkins University, and it looks like they're just giving them more money. It does not create some new federally enforceable way for people to go after other people to take away their guns. What this center appears to do is create best practices, as they call best practices, sharing information with partners about all this stuff. This is something that should be at the state level. If states are going to do this, and 21 states have these red flag laws, that's where it needs to be done, and it needs to be very careful. There are due process concerns here. Civil orders do not have the same level of due process protection. The concern with red flag laws is that people are having their guns taken away before they have due process. So if the federal government's getting involved here, that automatically concerns me. But I want to make sure people understand that this is not some new agency, or that there is some federal right of action that can now be used to go after people's Second Amendment rights. At least that's how it appears to me.
That's a really good clarification. And Ron Coleman, so, this is called the National Extreme Risk Protection Order Resource Center. I mean, this sounds like it's out of, Monsters, Inc. and Disney or something. But, what can this practically do in terms of what resources are they possibly providing? To your knowledge, I mean, does this include funding or other, maybe strings attached to the states that if you don't implement our priority, then, you're going to have major adverse consequences?
Well, that's generally how it works. And I think Michael really hit the nail on the head. Once the feds get their hands on something, they call the tune. They spend money that they don't even have, but it's always more than any state can afford to say no to. But they also get to federalize the process, own the process, and use it improperly. There simply is such a bad record on the part of the federal government getting involved in things that ought to be handled by states. And then you have Supreme Court justices saying things like, well, there is federal police power, isn't there? It's a terrible idea, but it's absolutely been thought through precisely for that reason.
And so, Mike Donnelly, this should obviously be challenged. And how can or should this be challenged in court and some of these, some of these other priorities, or even just challenged in Congress, like maybe not funding this anymore? I mean, that's really the bottom line. But it also seems like a lot of these nonprofits or other, do-gooders that are in DC that have the resources for a lot of these lawsuits, a lot of the times, they will just say, well, this isn't really within our wheelhouse. This isn't in our lane. That to me is one of the biggest problems with conservative pushback, is that we don't use our resources really effectively.
Well, I saw Thomas Massey's tweet where he said, we didn't authorize this, but apparently you did if you voted for the bill, and Congress voted for the bill. And, I got to give a real shout out to Senator Mike Lee, who went all out to try to stop this omnibus spending package. He basically said, look, to give members of Congress 24 hours to review a $1.2 trillion spending package is unconscionable. And I agree with him. But this is what happens. We're back to 2010 where we have to pass the bill before we can read what's in the bill. We need the Congress to step up and do its job, and the leadership needs to do the job and let people read the bill. Maybe somebody would have found this and they could have amended it out. It's hard to stop Congress from spending money, obviously, and that's a huge problem. So challenging this is going to be very difficult in court. If it's just spending money on best practices or databases and things like that, I mean, they apparently get to do that under the General Welfare Clause, which also we can debate that. But challenge it, challenge it by reading the bill and then not approving it.
Yeah. Well, what does it say to you, Ron Coleman, that more Republicans voted against this spending package than voted for it? And yet, even though Republicans have the majority in Congress, somehow we sided with the Democrats and they're still calling the shots here. I think that shows that the priorities of Republicans really aren't conservative anymore.
Well, let me suggest alternatively, Republicans have never had party discipline. It's not a Bolshevik-style party as the Democrats have become, where party discipline is phenomenal. We did see party discipline in Congress during the Trump judicial nominations, and boy, if there was ever a time for it to come through, that was a heck of a good time. But by and large, Republicans consider themselves people of principle. Or, let's face it, it is always easy to, from a distance, criticize a given vote, but compromises and horse trading are part of the deal. There are two parties. Those are the options. Can we put pressure? Should we put pressure on
Should we compromise?
Yes.
And should we horse trade on all of these things, including abortion funding and funding for, LGBT style stuff? Well, I don't think so, but I'm going to talk about that more coming up right after this. Thanks so much to our Legal Eagle panel. We'll be right back with more. Throughout history, there are clear moments that define our nation's path, and now you can own a piece of that history. I'm thrilled to announce the official Newt Gingrich contract with America coin from our friends at Legacy Precious Metals in partnership with Speaker Gingrich. This limited edition 1 ounce 99.99% silver coin commemorates the historic victory in 1994 when the Republican Party, under Speaker Gingrich's guidance, took control of Congress. The Newt Gingrich contract with America coin also symbolizes the transformative political platform that led to the landmark achievements like the overhaul of the U.S. welfare system and the Balanced Budget Act. This is a limited edition coin that will sell out. So whether you're looking for the perfect gift or you want to own a piece of history, act fast before they run out. The Newt Gingrich contract with America coin is more than an investment. It's a tribute to honest government and America. You can order it online at newtgingrichsilvercoin.com. That's newtgingrichsilvercoin.com and use promo code Jenna, that's JENNA, to get $10 off your purchase. The fallout continues on Capitol Hill after the $1.2 trillion spending package was passed by Congress in the House of Representatives and also the U.S. Senate. So this will head to Joe Biden's desk, and Americans are still asking the question, what exactly is in this spending bill? According to a headline in Fox News, millions for late-term abortion clinics, transgender devices, are buried deep in the $1.2 trillion spending package, and American taxpayers are funding centers that encourage children to transition without their parents' knowledge. So this really begs the question, what are Republicans doing when you have more Republicans that voted against this bill in the House than voted for it? What is Speaker Johnson doing, and why can't he hold this conference together? Well, Marjorie Taylor Greene, of course, has called to vacate the chair. Watch this.
With rules and promises to the American people that we would bring regular order back to Congress. Speaker Johnson has betrayed that by passing 3 CRs and then forcing us to pass or to vote on a 2-part omnibus, the second one being today. He also only gave us, I don't even know how, we had 1 day basically to read 1,012 pages, breaking the 72-hour rule. This is a betrayal of the American people. This is a betrayal of Republican voters. And the bill that we were forced to vote on forced Republicans to choose between funding to pay our soldiers and in doing so, funding late-term abortion. This bill was basically a dream and a wish list for Democrats and for the White House. It was completely led by Chuck Schumer, not our Republican Speaker of the House, not our conference, and we weren't even allowed to put amendments to the floor to have a chance to make changes to the bill. I filed the motion to vacate today, but it's more of a warning and a pink slip. I respect our conference. I paid all my dues to my conference. I'm a member in good standing, and I do not wish to inflict pain on our conference and to throw the House in chaos. But this is basically a warning, and it's time for us to go through the process, take our time, and find a new Speaker of the House that will stand with Republicans and our Republican majority instead of standing with the Democrats.
So this coming as Republicans continue to infight, which is what a lot of the media is calling it. I would just say have a probably disheartened discussion over what conservative priorities actually are. And this coming from Fox News as well. Trump silent as Biden signs the $1.2 trillion spending bill amid GOP infighting. Again, the mainstream media, even including Fox News, always uses that term infighting when really we need to discuss the conservative priorities. But former President Trump had no comment on the $1.2 trillion spending package, the sort of bill he previously vowed he would never sign. So where is leadership on this? And also, why hasn't Speaker Mike Johnson come forward and actually addressed these concerns from conservatives? So Marjorie Taylor Greene was asked in that press conference whether she really did want to vacate the chair and whether that's actually the appropriate solution. This is what she had to say.
So just to follow up on that, though, you're calling this a pink slip, a warning sign. The bottom line, you want Speaker Johnson out.
I wouldn't have filed a motion to vacate if I didn't. We need a new speaker. This is not personal against Mike Johnson. He's a very good man, and I have respect for him as a person, but he is not doing the job. The proof is in the vote count today. He passed a budget that should have never been brought to the floor, did not represent our conference, and it was passed with the Democrats and without the majority of the majority.
What happens?
So why aren't more Republicans saying that? And I know Speaker Mike Johnson very well personally, but I'm very surprised that he would bring this bill to the floor. And yet, when we look back at former Speaker Kevin McCarthy, who was ousted during that vote last October, then he still had a very difficult time bringing Republicans together in his conference. And this is the difference between Republicans and Democrats. Democrats, even when their priorities aren't 100% in exactly what maybe they individually want, they still understand what it means to be a bloc in voting. Republicans somehow seem to not understand that even with the very slim and even slimming majority, they can't get it together to actually have a cohesive stance so that something like the spending package could be voted down on party lines and sort of force Democrats to make other types of compromises. My good friend Todd Starnes even tweeted this, getting angry messages from evangelical Christians and some in the Christian broadcasting world. They say I should support Speaker Johnson no matter what, accused me of betraying Johnson by calling for his resignation. I had great hope for the speaker, I truly did, but I cannot support any member of Congress who knowingly provides funding for late-term abortion facilities and ungodly gender programs. I totally get what Todd Starnes is saying, and I agree with that, which is why I think that Mike Johnson needs to address that. And the longer he goes without coming out and speaking specifically about Republican priorities and why maybe there's some justification for why this compromise was necessary, the longer this goes on, the more I'm inclined to agree with Todd Starnes. But here's the point. Speaker Mike Johnson is facing the exact same challenges as Kevin McCarthy. And so if we vacate the chair, what is somebody else going to do? Even if Jim Jordan had become the speaker, or if Chip Roy or Thomas Massie, some of these other stalwart conservatives, I don't see that this is specifically a Mike Johnson problem. I think this is a Republican conference as a whole problem. Because if we are going along with this whole idea that the good is the enemy of the best, then that is going to fail us every single time. It's the same kind of rationale why some Christians and conservative evangelicals are against, for example, heartbeat bills. They'll say, oh, we don't need to sign a heartbeat bill because what about conception until heartbeat? And we believe that life begins at conception. We want to protect babies from the moment of conception. I totally agree with that. But if we don't get at least heartbeat bills in place, then we're not going to ever advance on the issue of pro-life. We're never going to get legislation that has any meaningful impact on the issue of life. You're never going to get 100% of priorities that you want as Republicans. This is what Democrats actually understand, and why I think they're sometimes better world changers than conservatives. Not because they have the better worldview or they stand for truth or any of these things. I mean, these are literally people who want to kill babies, right? We shouldn't care what they think, but why are they always the one winning? Why are they voting in a coalition and a conference that stands firm for something? I think it boils down to this. They understand that getting 80% of what they want is better than supporting an agenda that they 100% disagree with. This was the problem in my view, and from my insider perspective of the time that I spent working with President Trump and seeing what happened on Capitol Hill, this is exactly what happens. Republicans are unwilling to compromise. And if we don't have 100% of exactly what we want, we say, well, the good is the enemy of the best. That is such a misunderstanding, and I truly believe the wrong priorities for conservatives. Republicans need to start voting as an entire coalition and forcing Democrats to turn around and fund our priorities. We'll be right back with more. I had an opportunity recently to sit down with Olivia Krolczyk, who's a student who faced adverse consequences at a university for not buying into their woke DEI agenda. Watch this. As woke policies continue to be mandated across management in corporations, there are also some students that are suffering from these policies that are influencing academics. And so this op-ed coming from Fox News in this headline, my professor failed me because I didn't embrace DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Women must fight to exist. This Women's History Month, DEI threatens to erase our past and our future. So joining me now is Olivia Krolczyk, who is the ambassador for the Riley Gaines Institute of Leadership. So Olivia, what happened here? What school and class was this? And you actually were failed?
Yeah, so I was at the University of Cincinnati, and this was a DEI required course, like you said, and it was women's gender studies, and we were completing a project on feminism. And in this project, I chose to write about the history of women in sports, starting with like the first woman in the Olympics, all the way up to what happened with Riley Gaines. And in this project, I used the term biological woman, and my professor said it was transphobic and contributed to heteronormativity, so then she failed me.
Wow, that is incredible, and it's ridiculous. And of course, this is something like, women's studies or, things that are DEI required. But I mean, how did this professor even define a woman then if biological woman is somehow too heteronormative and is transphobic?
Yeah, well, she couldn't define a woman, which is part of the issue, because I exchanged a lot of emails with her trying to figure out, well, why isn't sex binary? And she was saying that it's not, and that woman is outdated and anyone can identify as a woman. So because I used the term biological woman, I was excluding everyone else, which is the whole point. I wanted to exclude men because I was talking about women's sports, not men who are pretending to be women.
Yeah, really good distinction, Olivia. And your professor should have appreciated that. And so was the title of the class just gender studies, or did it include, women's studies in it?
It was women's gender studies. Yep.
Yeah. Wait, I mean, so this is totally hypocritical, obviously, of this professor. And did you ultimately appeal the grade higher, or what was the conclusion of this failing grade, which is absolutely inappropriate?
Yeah, so it took about 2 weeks until I heard from anyone at the school. I was pretty much ignored until I had like a spotlight in the media and they realized a lot of people are messaging us, calling the school, mad about what happened to Olivia. So they eventually changed my grade. They reprimanded my professor and said, you have to take a free speech course and you have to submit your syllabus. But a couple of days later, quietly, without telling anyone, reversed this reprimand. So now she is actually back teaching at the University of Cincinnati, still teaching her courses.
Oh, wow. And she probably didn't have to actually take the free speech class or, have any sort of academic liberty. And so are you still matriculating there at the University of Cincinnati, or, what is your future plan?
Yeah, so I am taking my last few courses, and unfortunately, if I switched from University of Cincinnati, I would have to take at least like 2 semesters at a new school to get my degree. So it's not really worth the change, to go to a different school. But I'm almost done, and then I'll be done with the University of Cincinnati. But in the meantime, I have been working with the Riley Gaines Center, and we travel to different campuses across the nation and like talk to students about our stories, me and Riley, what has happened to us, and just really inspire them to also speak out about what is happening.
Yeah, and that's so important, Olivia, because your story certainly isn't an isolated incident. We're seeing more and more young women, especially, and of course, we can define a woman, and it is a basis of biology, it's a basis of chromosomes, and it's obviously self-evident truth. But we're seeing more and more young women who are standing up at universities or even at their places of employment and saying, no, that we can and we are in fact intentionally excluding men from women's events, and that's okay. That's not transphobic. That's not any sort of bigotry or any of these things that the leftists are trying to push. So, what is your message as an ambassador of the Riley Gaines Center to other young women who maybe see all of these concerns, or maybe have been victims of some of this DEI push themselves, and yet they're not quite yet as courageous as you in terms of making their voice heard?
Yeah, I guess I would say it's okay to disagree with your professors. It's okay to not just follow the trends that your friends are following. If they want to believe that it's okay for men to be in sports, you do not have to agree with them allowing men into women's sports. Like, you can just stand out. That is okay. And you will have the support of me, Riley, and so many other people who want to support you, because we're all in the same fight. You don't have to stay silenced, and you don't have to give an inch.
Yeah, and that's so well said, Olivia. And I think that you will inspire a lot of other young women. I know that Riley Gaines has simply for standing on the truth. And, neither of you probably expected that this would be something that you would, go on kind of this national tour for and have to stand up. I mean, it's 2024. This is really the thing that we're fighting about. But it is because the left is trying to indoctrinate young people through institutions that have been captured and are funded by the state, which as leftists are, attempting to gender queer everything and take away all of these rational, common sense, reality based definitions around biological normativity, and to look at a curriculum like a women's gender studies and then have this kind of response. It really goes to a fundamental ideology problem that a lot of these teachers are facing. I mean, how many or what has your experience been in terms of how many other students on the campuses that you and Riley go to, for other young women or even men who are willing to stand up that, women are different than they are? What has been the response in terms of how many other people you're seeing go through this same thing on their own college campuses?
Oh, there are so many. I am like not even just one in a couple students. Like, there are so many. There's, I think, like 65% of students on a college campus believe that their school is suppressing their free speech in case it offends another student. And I think that's really important to know, that I'm not just like one student this has happened to across the nation in like a couple months. No, this is happening every single day at almost every single school. I still get messages to this day saying, hey, you know what, this is happening to me at this school. And it's just absolutely absurd. I had a message from 2007, a student who went to University of Cincinnati, had this exact same issue happen. And that's really what sparked my interest in wanting to, speak out about this. Like, it's been happening since 2007, and it's still going on. It's getting worse and worse.
Yeah, well, I graduated from Colorado State in 2007, and there wasn't quite this same type of emphasis in some of my classes, but I also didn't take the gender women's studies and all that, because at least DEI wasn't quite as pushed down our throats as it is now. But I'm so grateful, Olivia, that you are standing firm. And how can we reach the Riley Gaines Center?
Oh, just go to RileyGainesCenter.org and then RileyGainesCenter.org/events to attend any events that Riley will be speaking at.
That's all the time we have for Jenna Ellis tonight. We'll see you tomorrow night.